Hello, everybody. Joanna here. Today I'm going to be talking about The Prophet of Edan, Book 2 in the Edan Trilogy by Philip Chase. To be upfront, Philip Chase is a very good friend of mine. He did give me an e-arc of the book, as well as this beautiful signed edition. And I will have some spoilers for Book 1 in this particular video. So if you haven't read Book 1, I do have a spoiler-free review of that book, as well as a wonderful discussion with Philip and friends that is non-spoiler for the first part, and then gets into spoilers. I will keep it spoiler-free for this particular book, though. And to start off, I'll just say that this was a great continuation of Book 1, in my opinion, where we left off in Book 1. And we are in the thick of the Holy War in this particular book. This is a holy war that's led by the Kingdom of Torland under King Irkenwald and High Priest Bledla with the Way of Edan religion, the priests, and dragons. Dragons have a huge role in this story, as well as some other creatures as well that are being utilized or exploited for use to win this war, to have this conquest of all the surrounding kingdoms. And this is an interesting war because a lot of these kingdoms in the story, many of them have a history of opposition with one another. And so you do see some alliances form, I think some reluctant alliances, some grudging alliances, and you also see some further opposition created as the result of war. So it gets kind of complicated. We do see the world open up quite a bit in this story. And then meanwhile, we have our main character, Dayraven, with Sequara in the island of Astrolad, and they are there with their other friends, and they're trying to join forces together to work at opposing this holy war, stopping it in its tracks. So Dayraven, as we learned in Book 1, has this elf shard curse in his mind, and so he's trying to work with that curse as well as his gift, which he has the gift to a great magnitude, I would say. And then we have Sequara, and Sequara has worked her whole life training her gift. She uses what's called a Malkti. So a Malkti, if I'm saying that right, is this blue light energy. It's described as the energy around a sorcerer or sorceress, and it can be also described as like a lightning bolt that comes out of her hands. And so she uses this obviously to oppose the dragons and the priests of the Way of Edan, the other armies and evil forces, but she also uses her gift for healing as well to heal the victims. So she and Dayraven and their found family, they have to make many sacrifices along the way in order to halt this war, in order to salvage the kingdoms. And so it's not an easy task. As far as characters are concerned, we do get multiple perspectives in this story, and I'm not going to go into detail about all the characters. I'll just briefly state the different perspectives. We do have, for the good guys, Dayraven and Sequara and Yorn, Orvindil, Galdor, King Balk. And then on our opposing side, we have Bledla, Irkenwald, Yoramon, and we get a new character named Moonzil. And Moonzil is really interesting because Moonzil, he is the last of his tribe, the Grey Wolf tribe, and his mission is based on a dream he had. He's trying to unite all the tribes together under the banner of Torland in order to get revenge on the kingdom in the east, Sildarin. And so this kingdom in the east is known for having a history of treating the tribes as slaves and just treating them horribly. So he's trying to gather the forces, to unite forces, to get revenge. And this whole entire plot gets a little complicated, as we'll see as we read on. I do have to say that my favorite character was the elf. I might be a little biased towards elves, but I did think that Dayraven grew as a character. And it was clear to me why the other characters looked up to Dayraven. I mean, he's very altruistic. He's very courageous and duty bound. And I would say that I think that he shows some growth by the end of the story as well. But for me, I thought what was cool about him was the elf. Like the elf scenes were just so otherworldly, so imaginative. So that was my favorite thing, honestly. And Sakura continues to be a standout character. She has spent her whole life working on refining her skill, and she does everything in service to her kingdom, to her people. And so she's also very altruistic, but when she has struggles, I feel like they have a lot of weight to them because she's worked so hard. So I think that was something I deeply connected to. I would say that most of the characters tended to be good or bad. I don't think we get a lot of gray morality, though I would say that Yoramon does continue to intrigue. And Orvindil has a very interesting backstory that's revealed. And I would say also that Munzil might potentially be a morally gray character. I think the next book will unveil that further. And although our characters tend to be on one side of the spectrum or the other as far as good and bad, I do think that there is some exploration of how a certain bad character may not have always been so bad. So I think there is some nuance there. Now, what was interesting for me about this story were the contrasts because when I was with Raven and his found family in those sections, I honestly felt at times it was so sweet and wholesome that I felt like I was almost reading cozy fantasy. I mean, we have mentor relationships and these wonderful light banter moments between characters, a sweet slow burn romance. And then this was contrasted by these epic, sweeping, high stakes battle scenes with dragons vomiting fire, dismembered body parts, fountains of blood, piles of corpses. It was just such a wild contrast. And then another contrast included Raven when he's with the elf magic, which was explored in book one. And we get some more fantastic, wondrous elf magical scenes in this book. So, those particular scenes, they just explore the numinous and sublime. They've just felt very surreal and transcendental. And I have to say that with all these different contrasts, even though it sounds kind of difficult to compare cozy fantasy with the holy war, high stakes holy war, and gore and bloodshed, and then these transcendental passages, I thought that the writing style was very cohesive. So I never felt like I was reading a different book despite having these very different contrasts. What I will say about the battle scenes is that my favorite battles happened towards the end of the book, and that was when we did have a great fluctuation in tone and pacing, which got me to really connect with the characters and led to some very emotional moments. I ended up tearing up a couple of times. The other battle scenes, I would say they do not lack in variety of setting and action. Just want to be clear about that. I just did appreciate some of the more emotional moments towards the end. And I would also say that the themes in this story kind of relate to these different contrasts. So, as far as themes are concerned, I would say with the cozy fantasy elements, we do get those tropes of found family and the mentor relationship, a slow burn romance. But I would say we also get some explorations of doubt versus hope. And then with the epic grand scale battle scenes, I think that the holy war aspects of the story really delve into the large scale themes of othering, of zealotry, of exploitation, abuse of power. So, when we're exploiting groups of people or creatures, and related to that, I would say that we also deal with more explorations of history and how history plays a role in justifying opposition and also complacency, self preservation, waiting for the problem to be at our doorstep before we're willing to do something about it. And as far as like Buddhist related or inspired themes, I would say that those would relate to grand awareness and also attachment. I think attachment is explored through desire, love, and through passion as motivators. And so, of course, those can be used for good as motivators for good, but they also come at the cost of attachment, and those can lead to consequences such as heartbreak and failure. So I think that those were there as well. I should also mention there were some fantastic, majestic settings introduced in this story, and I thought the settings were interesting because we are introduced to different kingdoms, and I felt as though the kingdoms reflected the leadership. Some of my favorite settings included a city called the Hidden City, as well as a mountain called Mount Wurmberg, and of course, the Song of Origins that Raven visits when he's under the elf spell magic. So, those were absolutely incredible to read about. Again, some very emotional moments towards the end of the story. And I just thought that even though there were some things that were a bit familiar to me as a fantasy reader, some familiar tropes, some things that actually reminded me quite a bit of The Lord of the Rings, honestly, I still feel like this did some things that were very innovative as far as like the blend of elements, again, cozy fantasy elements with bloodshed in a holy war and also the Buddhist inspired elements. So I thought the combination of all of those things was very fascinating. And I really look forward to discussing this book in the future because I have so many spoiler thoughts. So I'm going to keep those to myself for now. There's much, much more to say about the book, but please let me know in the comment section below if you've read the book, if you're interested in reading the book, because I would love to hear from you. And thank you so much for watching. Have a great rest of your day. Bye bye.